Have you ever wondered why November 11th holds a significant place in the hearts of the French people? This date, etched deeply into their national consciousness, marks the observance of Armistice Day, or as it is known in France, l'Armistice de la Première Guerre mondiale. It's a day that commemorates the end of a devastating conflict, World War I, a war that left indelible scars on the land and in the lives of those who lived through it. But it's not just a day of remembrance, it's also a day of solemn celebration, because on this very date, in the year 1918, an armistice was signed at Compiègne in northern France. This historic agreement between the Allied forces and Germany signaled the cessation of hostilities, bringing an end to the horrors of war. Now let us travel back in time and uncover the events that led to this pivotal moment in history. As the dawn of the 20th century arrived, the world was on the brink of a massive conflict. A series of events would soon unfold that would plunge the globe into one of the most devastating wars in history. It all began with an act of violence that sent shockwaves around the world. In June of 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated in Sarajevo. This single event triggered a chain reaction that would lead to the outbreak of World War I. In the aftermath of the assassination, nations started choosing sides, forming alliances based on shared interests and historical ties. The Central Powers, led by Germany and Austria-Hungary, squared off against the Allies, which included France, Russia and the United Kingdom. As tensions grew, these alliances set the stage for a conflict on a scale never seen before. France found itself in the heart of this escalating tension. Sharing a border with Germany, the country became a crucial battleground. The French, with their indomitable spirit, stood unyielding, determined to protect their homeland at all costs. The war was not just fought in the trenches, it was fought in the hearts of every French citizen. As the war unfolded, the world watched in horror. The conflict grew, consuming countries and devastating populations. The advances in technology and military strategy meant that this war was unlike any other. The world was caught in the throes of a new kind of warfare, one that brought destruction and death to an unprecedented scale. Yet, amid the chaos and carnage, there was a glimmer of hope. Diplomatic efforts were made to bring an end to the hostilities, but the path to peace was fraught with obstacles, and the war would continue to rage on for 4 long years. With no end in sight, the world held its breath, hoping for a resolution. The shadow of war loomed large, casting a dark pall over the globe. But as we know, even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light waiting to break through. The war raged on, but behind the scenes, discussions for peace had begun. As the bloodshed continued, leaders and diplomats from both sides were starting to see the futility of the conflict. Their thoughts turned towards an armistice, a formal agreement to stop the fighting and begin negotiations for a permanent peace. These conversations weren't easy. The Allied forces, comprising primarily of Britain, France and the United States, held the upper hand. They were making significant strides on the battlefield, and they knew it. Consequently, they were unwilling to settle for anything less than a total German surrender. Yet, it was clear that the war was taking a heavy toll on everyone involved. The cost in lives, resources and morale was simply too high. Germany, on the other hand, was in a precarious situation. Their military was stretched thin, their resources depleted, and their civilian population weary. Recognizing the need for a cessation of hostilities, they made the first move. In October of 1918, a German delegation reached out to US President Woodrow Wilson, proposing an armistice based on his 14 points plan for peace. The negotiations were tense, with both sides eager for respite but unwilling to appear weak. They were held in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne, a location chosen for its seclusion and security. It was here, in the quiet of the northern French countryside, away from the noise and horror of the front lines, that the fate of millions was decided. The terms of the armistice were harsh, demanding immediate cessation of hostilities, withdrawal of German forces, and the surrender of resources and equipment. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but with their backs against the wall, the German delegation had little choice but to agree. And so, on a chilly morning on November 11th, 1918, the armistice was signed, marking the end of the Great War. It was not a moment of celebration, but rather one of relief, exhaustion, and cautious optimism. On November 11th, 1918, a glimmer of hope emerged amidst the chaos. The ink had dried on the armistice, marking the end of the Great War and the beginning of a new era. France, along with the rest of the world, was never the same again. The armistice, signed on that fateful November day in Compiègne, brought not only an end to the ghastly battles, but also planted the seeds for a future that was to be shaped by this monumental event. In France, the day of the armistice, November 11th, was established as a day of national remembrance, known as Armistice Day, or l'Armistice de la Première Guerre mondiale. It wasn't just a day marked in calendars, but a day etched in the hearts of the French people. It was a day to honor the brave, to remember the fallen, and to reflect on the lessons of a war that had cost humanity dearly. Armistice Day became a cornerstone of French culture, a day when the entire nation would pause to remember. The pride, the sorrow, the resilience, and the hope, all encapsulated in a single day. It stood as a testament to the French spirit that had endured the trials of war and emerged with a renewed resolve for peace. But the legacy of November 11th wasn't confined to the borders of France. The echoes of the armistice reverberated across the world. In many countries, the day was observed as Remembrance Day, a day to honor the memory of the fallen and to reflect on the horrors of war. It was a shared moment of global reflection, a collective nod to a past that had forever changed the course of history. And so every year on November 11th, we pause to remember the end of a war that changed the world and honor those who fought for peace. We remember not to dwell on the past, but to remind ourselves of the price of peace and the value of unity. The legacy of November 11th is a legacy of remembrance, of resilience, and above all, of hope for a world free from the shadows of war.